Hey everyone, Creator Mom. I'm back to share from the book about narcissism. Growing up as the scapegoat to a narcissistic parent, a guide to healing. What's funny is as I'm reading this book, he asks, at the beginning of every chapter, he asks a few questions, like discovery questions. And most of the times I'm like, yes, 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 right? It makes me feel very validated because I have often felt very confused, very like I'm making it all up, which he says that is a thing that people who go through this type of stuff feel. And I'm like, wow, that's crazy. What I'm reading right now is another like holy shit moment because I was telling my friend that like when I get compliments, people, when they get complimented, they feel good. They're like, oh, thank you. You know what I mean? Like you acknowledge something good about them. But for people like me, that are complimented, we feel shamed. We feel, vroom, vroom. Yes, the motorcycle agrees. We feel unworthy of those compliments. We feel nervous. Like I know for myself, like whenever somebody sees something good in me and says it and recognizes it, I feel like not anxious, not anxiety. I just feel nervous, like, oh my God, like kind of like crisis, So yeah, just feeling uneasy after receiving a compliment. This is chapter 34 and it's titled Reclaim What You Sacrificed. And the three questions are this. Do you feel estranged from the positive ways in which other people seem to experience you? Yes. Does it seem like every measure of success you achieve is pure luck? Yes, I've done that to myself, right? Yeah, like for instance, a scholarship. Oh, well, just luck, right? Okay. Or, I'll give the kudos to my parent actually. Like, oh, it was due to them that I got this scholarship, like if it wasn't for them. Do you tell yourself that people who like you don't know the real you? So, those are the three questions. And then I want to read here. It says, recovery from narcissistic abuse can be confusing. Yes. It is important to keep in mind that for the scapegoat survivor, what can feel most dangerous is considering positive things about themselves, right? It can feel dangerous. I'm like, oh my God, yes, that is me. Like I go into this like danger response when people give me compliments, like, well, that's not safe, And I thought, that is just so odd. If you've had the misfortune of being scapegoated by a narcissistic parent, there are very real survival mechanisms in place that prevent you from believing your own mother or father could have been unfair in how they treated you. The child's psychological survival requires that they believe they have a parent who is willing to care for them. If that parent is frightening or hurtful and there are no other viable adults to attach to, it creates a problem, and the child has no one to help them solve it. The child's solution is often to wear the costume of scapegoat as the narcissistic parent requires, while forcing themselves to believe that the parent knows what is best. Given such early circumstances, it stands to reason that becoming aware of your strengths as a person might feel dangerous. Crediting yourself with admirable traits would be at odds with the costume that you used to ensure a very important form of survival. And yet, and I always wondered, I'm like, is it really that deep that I feel nervous after comments? I just couldn't figure it out. Like, I didn't know why. Anyways, and yet here you are looking for a way to cure your inner sense of pain, muzzled agony, emptiness, and confusion. Another thing I get is just that I feel like I didn't experience something that as bad as other people might have experienced, but again, was as doing is devaluing myself, taking away from my own experience, right? Everyone has a different experience, right? Different levels of this stuff. But the point is that we all have to heal ourselves, or figure this shit out. One way to orient yourself is to, when you experience heightened bad feelings, ask yourself if you have done or thought something that gave credit to who you are as a person. If you are a scapegoat survivor, bad feelings may get triggered by such positive thoughts about yourself. That sequence was exactly what let you survive earlier. That's what happened to me. And I couldn't understand it. I'm like, why would I feel scared after somebody gives me a compliment? It just makes no sense. It's just a response that I guess I developed that I couldn't understand until somebody understood it for me. Anyways, if you find what you tend to feel particularly bad after feeling good about yourself, that's great, because now you have identified very fertile ground to work on in your recovery. With this awareness, you can work to notice the thoughts that might intervene between the good feelings and the bad feelings. Bruce was a writer who was in therapy after surviving a childhood where he was the scapegoat to a narcissistic mother. She had to see him as incapable and in need of her help at all costs. Bruce learned that if he started to build momentum in something he was doing, he had to appear feckless and confused, or she would have felt outdone by him. The narcissist parent is always the boss. When that happened, she would viciously berate, undermine, and attack him for some made-up reason. In therapy one day, Bruce reported that he'd completed an entire chapter on the novel he was working on. In the next session, he came in deflated and said he'd completely lost his mojo in the past week. His mind was scattered and he kept feeling distracted. His therapist inferred that his use and acknowledgement of his actual prowess as a writer may have set off this bout of self-disparagement. His therapist said, "I wonder if something didn't feel quite right or maybe safe after you told me how well writing was going last week." Bruce said, "What do you mean? Why wouldn't that feel safe? I was feeling good." Therapist: "I know you were, but I also know that in the past you figured out some pretty painful ways to contort yourself so that you were seen as incapable or directionless and in need of being told what to do." I have felt like that before. Directionless. It kind of plagues me. That's a lot like the state you seem to find yourself in now. That's crazy. Bruce says, "Yeah, you're right, but I don't know what to do about this." Well, acknowledging that it might be happening is a really important first step. Seeing how things are operating now suggests that they could be different in the future. As you think back on leaving session last week, can you pay attention to any thoughts you may have had about telling me about your success with this chapter? Bruce says, "Well, I remember feeling some sort of disease. It's hard to put, not dis-ease. Not disease, dis-ease. It is hard to put into words, but something didn't quite feel right. Then I went home and tried to write more, and I was at a complete loss." Yes, that dis-ease seems to have been a warning signal from your past that you were in dangerous territory. By demonstrating your competence, you were doing something that this part of you associates with losing someone you really needed at the time and maybe incurring their wrath. Bruce says, yeah, I see that, but what can I do about it? You can perhaps try to mimic what we are doing now. Pay attention to this part of you that's concerned about what will happen if you know your strengths. Offering that part of you your compassionate understanding, then providing the new information that you are now safe, right? Like telling yourself, we don't have to, we don't need this anymore. We don't need this response anymore. We're safe now. You're in the clear. You get to write to your full potential without the reprisal you used to have to steel yourself for. Now Bruce's struggles with his writing did not disappear in one fell swoop, but he began to pay attention to the pangs of fear, the pages of fear that arose when he brandished aspects of who he was in his life. Next, he offered himself validation and compassion. He would remind himself that he was no longer dependent on his mother nor vulnerable to her attacks. Over time, and with a lot of patience with himself, he got to experience longer and longer periods of sustained writing. This translated to longer periods of connecting with himself while feeling safe in doing so. Over the course of a few years, Bruce's main purpose shifted from avoiding the post-traumatic danger of being caught without the scapegoat costume to experiencing the rewards of exercising his strengths as a person. That's cool. This example highlights another key ingredient in knowing it is safe to reclaim what you once had to sacrifice. To recover from narcissistic abuse, the presence of a new relationship where the scapegoat costume is not necessary. Bruce knew his therapist had his best interests at heart and therefore wouldn't want him to wear the costume. Such relationships can also happen outside of the therapy office. As illustrated with Bruce, when you have experienced enough safety in being your real and positive self, a shift may occur. That's really cool. What the scapegoat survivor was initially denied by his or her narcissistic parents becomes achievable. The prospect of living to experience the firsthand meaning of gratification of being who you are and who you were meant to be in this world. God, that's such a beautiful thing. That is such a beautiful thing. And I really look up to people, or, and just admire people who know who they are and they exercise their gifts. And they said something here about knowing your strengths. What the heck? Yeah, like that's always been a difficult thing for me to know, my strengths and gifts and things like that or whatever. Maybe it wasn't safe to know those things or exercise that. I don't know. Okay. Let's see here. As illustrated with Bruce, when you have experienced enough safety in being a real and positive self, a shift may occur. You undertake endeavors because they feel aligned with who you know yourself to be, rather than solely as a means to the end of avoiding a post-traumatic danger. I am talking about this not to discount the value of the effort it takes to get to a point where such self-congruence is not yet safe to experience. Rather, I am hoping that fleshing out what life after reclaiming yourself looks like can serve a hopeful function. So yeah, I think that for me, that at least I feel like at least I'm at this point where I like acknowledge and recognize it. Like I try to dig into what's going on. Like if somebody gives me a compliment and I feel like unsafe, I kind of try to press into what I'm feeling and see what thoughts are there, what's going on inside of myself, just by quieting down and just being. I think for me in my life, I always had a sense of running I just see running. Like I'm always running from something. Maybe running from my narcissistic parent. That's one. Um, Sometimes I feel like if I'm not doing something, not sometimes, a lot of times, I feel like if I'm not doing something, I am unproductive, useless, like just unproductive, doing nothing with my life. And sometimes I do things out of that, which is I don't think is good, I don't know, I guess just to kind of get rid of that feeling. Thinking that it probably stems from, I don't know, maybe anything I do never being good enough, or when I was into something, just being berated and saying, oh, is that all you're gonna do? So nothing was good enough. Yeah, just being pushed to being like told that I'm not being productive enough or something like that, or constructive enough. Yeah, something like that. I'm still sorting through, and I really hope that by reading this book that I can not only come to awareness, but that I can come to positive solutions, like this guy in this story. He kept saying, yeah, well, I mean, sure, but what do I do about it, right? Like, what good is it to know what your problem is if you can't, if you can't feel like you can fix it? So, yeah. Anyways, if you have experienced similar and if you listened for 17 minutes, thank you. And, just post your experience down below.